terror. That's right. Scary new details from the UK terror plot. 2 of the London terror suspects took steps to apply for medical programs in the United States. How do we combat this new profile of terror?
Joining us now from Tampa is Scotland Yard Special Operations Team Leader Steve Purl. He's also COO of Grand ISS, that's an investigative security services company. Steve, thanks for joining us this morning. It's good to have you back with Fox and Friends. Real quickly, what's going on here with this new threat of terror? It seems like they're changing their tactics now.
Certainly does, Greg. As we saw that 2 of the doctors did apply, or certainly came into the United States attempting to get jobs. It's my understanding that they didn't take the examination that was required and ended up as doctors practicing in the UK.
Steve, in some respects, isn't this a failure of intelligence in the UK? Because the plot started to unfold, and then they were able to intercede and make apprehensions and that kind of thing. I mean, there was no indication, no chatter, at least nothing publicized. So isn't this an intelligence failure?
I don't think it's necessarily an intelligence failure. As I said at the outset on Fox and Friends last week, that I didn't believe that it was an Al-Qaeda plot per se. I believe that these were a group of doctors that were sympathetic, that were emulating Al-Qaeda. We saw that from the sloppiness of the bombs, thankfully. They didn't explode. They were sloppily assembled, and it didn't have any of the hallmarks of Al-Qaeda.
All right, Steve, we know that 2 of these doctors had tried, or at least one of them had tried to make it into the United States, had even inquired about it, but didn't follow up on that. Is this any indication that here in the United States we should be on guard against possible terrorists who may be trying to enter this country as medical professionals?
Not just as medical professionals. On the 7/7 bombings, which were 2 years ago today, one of those involved was a teacher. I think this just goes to show that when it comes to dealing with Al-Qaeda operatives in the Western world, they're not simply mules, for want of a better word. They're not badly educated people. We're dealing with educated professional people here.
And you know, they are educated and they are doctors, and that's why I'm surprised, Steve, that they weren't able to pull this off. You mentioned a moment ago how crude these devices were. I mean, they can perform surgery, but they had a little trouble connecting the wires. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't. Hopefully they were better doctors than they were terrorists, and I say that tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
These were potential devastating devices. However, for whatever reason, they didn't explode. And I think that just goes back to what President Bush said. These people have to be lucky once. We have to be lucky all the time. Thankfully, we were lucky here.
Yeah, Steve, you're right about that. Now, I was talking about tactics earlier. It looks like Al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia tactics are being used on the streets of Iraq. They're using small attacks as opposed to the big spectacular attack. Is that what's changing? Are they adopting these Iraq ways?
I think that that's a possibility. I know that they've called for that. Obviously, from a logistics point of view, a guy walking into a shopping mall with a hand grenade and pulling the pin, there's far less logistics in that than assembling a bomb, getting a vehicle, placing it in the vehicle, putting the vehicle into a side street, and then trying to initiate the device. Certainly it's going to cause a lot more terror with a lot more smaller devices going on.
Steve Purl, former Scotland Yard Special Ops Team Leader, thank you very much for your insight. We'll be talking to you in the future.
Thanks, guys.